Killed by its own price war. Kmart didn't start as some doomed disaster. It started as a genuinely smart idea. Back in 1962, the same year Walmart and Target opened their first stores, Kmart was already a giant, built on a much older company called Kresge, a five-and-dime chain that had been around since the early 1900s. The blue light special became a cultural icon, an actual flashing blue light on a pole that store staff would wheel through the aisles announcing a surprise discount for the next few minutes only. People would run across the store to grab it. That's not a metaphor. They literally sprinted. For a while, Kmart was the biggest discount retailer on earth. Bigger than Walmart, bigger than Target. It's easy to forget that now, but in its prime, Kmart wasn't chasing anybody. Everyone else was chasing Kmart. The person most associated with the era we're covering isn't the founder, Sebastian Kresge, who built the five-and-dime chain decades earlier, and was, by documented accounts, a famously frugal man who reportedly disliked spending money on almost anything, down to keeping the heat low in his own office. The person who matters here is Charles Conaway, who became Kmart's CEO in June 2000. Conaway came in young, in his late 30s, which was unusual for a company this size. He arrived with a resume built at CVS, where he'd been credited with helping modernize the drugstore chain's operations, and he carried a reputation as a turnaround guy, someone who could walk into a tired old company and shake it awake. He was brought in specifically to fix Kmart, to modernize it, to make it fight back against Walmart and Target, who by then had both overtaken Kmart in size. Publicly, Conaway talked a big game about technology investment, about overhauling Kmart's supply chain and inventory systems, about dragging a decades-old retailer into the internet age. He gave interviews sounding confident, even urgent, about the need for change. The problem is, some of what he actually did next is now extremely well documented through bankruptcy filings and later lawsuits, and it isn't the careful technology story he promised investors. In the 70s and 80s, Kmart wasn't just competing with Walmart, it was crushing it in store count and revenue. By the mid-80s, Kmart had over 2,000 stores scattered across the country, in towns Walmart hadn't even considered yet. It expanded aggressively, snapping up other retail brands like Walden Books, Builder Square, and Sports Authority, turning itself into a kind of retail conglomerate rather than just a discount chain. For a huge chunk of American shoppers, Kmart was the discount store. Sears wouldn't merge with it until years later, long after this story ends. Walmart was still the scrappy underdog out of Bentonville, Arkansas, expanding mostly through small towns Kmart considered beneath its attention. If you'd told a Kmart executive in 1987 that Walmart would eventually bury them, they'd have laughed you out of the building. That's the tragedy of hindsight in this story. Nothing about Kmart's fall looked inevitable from where they were standing. Here's the twist that a lot of people miss. Kmart's downfall wasn't really about one dramatic villain moment. It was a strategic decision that looked bold on paper and turned into a logistics nightmare in practice. In late 2001, under Conaway, Kmart launched something called the Blue Light Always Pricing Initiative, an attempt to directly copy Walmart's everyday low price model, permanent low prices instead of periodic sales. Sounds reasonable, right? Except Kmart slashed prices on tens of thousands of items without first fixing its outdated, inefficient supply chain, the whole system of trucks, warehouses, and inventory tracking that gets products from a factory onto a store shelf. Walmart had spent literally decades and billions of dollars building a logistics network that let it survive on razor-thin margins. Kmart tried to copy the pricing overnight without any of the plumbing behind it. So Kmart was selling stuff cheaper, while it cost them more to actually get that stuff onto shelves. It's the retail equivalent of selling lemonade below the cost of the lemons, and then being surprised when you run out of money for more lemons. Analysts and insiders raised concerns at the time about how Kmart could sustain aggressive discounting without the back-end systems Walmart had spent decades building. Kmart pushed forward anyway, betting that sales volume would somehow cover the gap. It didn't. Within months, the cracks became impossible to hide. Kmart had over-ordered inventory trying to stock up for the price war, then couldn't move it fast enough through its own distribution system. Distribution centers were reportedly overwhelmed. Some stores had empty shelves on popular items customers actually wanted, while warehouses elsewhere sat stuffed with unsold goods. Nobody could get to the right location in time. It's the kind of failure that's almost darkly funny if you're not the one losing your job over it. A company drowning in product while its shelves look bare. Vendors started getting nervous about whether Kmart could pay its bills on time. And when vendors get nervous, they slow down shipments or demand cash up front, which makes the shortage problem even worse, not better. It's a spiral: less cash, less trust from suppliers, less inventory, fewer sales, less cash again. By January 2002, Kmart had roughly $17 billion in assets and about the same in liabilities. The company wasn't broke in the sense of having nothing of value. It was broke in the sense of having no working cash flow left to actually run day-to-day operations, pay employees, and restock shelves on time. On January 22, 2002, Kmart filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, which means the company asked a federal court for legal breathing room to reorganize its debts while continuing to operate, rather than shutting down immediately and liquidating everything. At the time, it was the largest retail bankruptcy filing in American history. Roughly 600 underperforming stores were closed, and tens of thousands of employees lost their jobs in the restructuring that followed, which is the part of this story that isn't funny at all, no matter how absurd the strategic decisions behind it were. Charles Conaway resigned as CEO a few months later, in March 2002, as the company worked through its bankruptcy proceedings. It's worth being precise here. Conaway was never criminally convicted of anything related to Kmart's collapse. There were shareholder lawsuits filed afterward and public scrutiny over his spending decisions, including reported use of corporate jets during a period when the company was hemorrhaging cash. But no criminal conviction against him is on the public record. Kmart itself didn't disappear at this point. It emerged from bankruptcy in 2003, considerably smaller and leaner, and then merged with Sears in 2005 to form Sears Holdings, a deal engineered by investor Edward Lampert. So where did everyone end up? Charles Conaway largely stepped out of the public retail spotlight after leaving Kmart in 2002 and has not held another major public CEO role since, based on available public information. Kmart, as a brand, technically still exists, though almost invisibly, down from over 2,000 stores at its peak to a small handful today, with some sources citing fewer than 5 remaining locations in the entire United States. Sears Holdings, the combined company Kmart merged into, eventually filed for its own Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2018. A slow, sad postscript that shows the underlying problems were never really solved, just merged into a bigger, slower-moving company. The blue light itself was retired as a marketing gimmick years before the bankruptcy even happened, which in hindsight feels like a strange bit of foreshadowing. The lesson here isn't just debt kills companies, because Kmart's debt wasn't really the root problem, it was a symptom of something else. The real lesson is that copying a competitor's strategy without copying the infrastructure behind it is a recipe for disaster. You can slash prices all you want, but if the trucks aren't moving on schedule and the warehouses are in chaos, you're just bleeding money faster, with a smile on your face while you do it. What do you think? Could Kmart have survived if it had fixed its supply chain before launching the price war, instead of during it? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe. We post a new bankruptcy story every day. Which companies collapse do you want to see next? Write it in the comments.